I'm glad I came back.
The black man thought that he could go to the city and would be accepted with open arms because the slogan has been, go north. This is where the opportunities were. So he left the farming area and he went north, and he found that if he went there in great numbers, that the white people really didn't want it. And actually, the white people moved out to the suburbs, and now the cities have become all black. And so black people have been running and chasing whites from one locality to the other. I think it's time that we quit chasing whites, quit trying to be like whites, come right back to the land where we started from and really start building and build an economy. We can build an economy on this land.
Open your heart to what I need. In the whole world, you know.
It looks as if it's business as usual in the Old South. A plantation, a decaying old mansion, harvesting time in the tobacco fields. But now there's a difference. Amid these reminders of another age, there is a drastic change underway on this land. This is to be the site of a bold new experiment. On this property, formerly a plantation, a new city will rise. A city inspired and controlled by blacks. It is Soul City, situated in Warren County, North Carolina. The guiding light behind the project is Floyd McKissick, well known nationally for his years of struggle in the civil rights movement.
This is Soul City. We own approximately 2,500 acres of land here. This is the old big house. In slavery time, the slaves lived in these quarters. As far as you can see around here, we own. This is where Soul City will rise into its own. Right now, we got a population of 56 people. We started off in January with 1. In about 17 years, 50,000 people will live in this town, and we'll have industry, medical services. We'll have anything comparable to what other cities have without the manifest problems that the major metropolitan areas have today. The truth of the matter is the problem starts here, and the problem is merely identified by a process of migration to the big urban centers in New York, Boston, Chicago, and etc. But this is the highest point of migration in North Carolina to the city. And until we say, look, we're going to start solving the problem here, then we'll never solve the problem in the cities.
George Arrington lives in Warren County, and like many young men from the rural South, migrated north right after high school. Now he has returned disillusioned.
I got out of school, man, and went north, got a job as an animal technician in the lab, got into this drug thing, this hustling thing, and like most of the young guys from this area, like that's what is in their head right now, man, you know, for the split to get into this city thing. And like the city thing is no thing, man. Once you get into yourself, man, you're into, that's it. You're into life. Once you get into yourself, there's no big thing in the city that you can grab and come back with.
But work is hard to come by in Warren County. This was at one time the center of a thriving tobacco belt. Now most farmers can no longer make a living from the soil. The average income in the area is less than $2,000 per family. William Plummer, who owns 60 acres, describes their plight.
I can almost explain itself. I can sell about 4,200 pounds of tobacco. But if you look for a 60% average, you can multiply, you see what it is. It'll be you said $2,500 a year. That's the gross, that's not the net. Well, after you take an oil bill, fertilizer bill, insecticide, and labor, well, you see where it brings from 25. So it's just a, you can't survive. You got to find other means to try to make out.
And there are no other means because there's no
other means because there's nowhere to go. Soul City, I believe, is the only hope.
Well, most of them are very excited about it because it's something different that, we never had around here to say build a city. Because usually the other cities, they're just extending them.
I live here in Soul City. I came from New York. I was living in a very crowded apartment, a prison in the sky, what they call the projects, and I came here with my 5 children, and I enjoy it tremendously. It's much better for me economically, physically, and mentally. I love it.
Fantastic. I think it's terrific, that we've got a piece of land like this. I've been here now something like 6 to 8 weeks, and I've been looking at the site, and I think we've got a gold mine in terms of developing a city.
Harvey Gant, in charge of designing Soul City, is an architect and city planner.
We have an opportunity not to desecrate the hillside here, but to put houses on the hills because they gently slope. We've got streams that run in and around. We can build roads that wrap around these gently rolling hills. Can you imagine then townhouses on these slopes? Can you imagine then the greenways that run along where you see now these trees?
But it's a long way from the architect's conception to the actual construction of a city. No one has ever tried to build a city completely from scratch before. For one thing, it will take $250 million for land development costs, and major industry is needed to provide jobs. We asked McKissick about the problems he faces.
Well, our number one problem is finance. That is, we got to bring together the federal government, funds from the federal government, funds from the state government. Our second problem is attracting industry. And our third problem is concerned with relationships between the people here and, of course, people on a statewide and countywide basis.
McKissick has assembled a staff of 4 top executives to help him carry out his ambitious plans. They are W.D. McNeil, Director of Planning and overall project co-manager; Skip Talbot, Chief Financial Officer, formerly an officer with First National City Bank of New York; Gordon Carey, project co-manager, who is now working on attracting industry into Soul City; and Chief Planner Harvey Gant. Gant, an MIT graduate in architecture and city planning, feels the community itself should help in the planning of Soul City. So periodically he calls in residents from the surrounding area to get their views in meetings like this one. Like many who have heard about Soul City, they wanted to know why it takes so long to start the actual building.
One of the things that we want to do here is to allow the people a chance to participate. So what we're doing is broadening the base of planning. We're involving a lot more planners than is normally done. And to do that takes time. That's why we haven't started construction, The government, under the New Communities Act of 1968, says that they will back any new community project up to as much as 90% of the total development cost. That means that we can go out, once the government guarantees our project, we can go out and borrow money with a great deal more ease than we now can, because everybody knows that the full faith and credit of the United States government is behind our project. That is, if we default, the government pays up to 90%. So that's important before we can really move on.
Then Gant asked the group if they thought the new city should express a special black lifestyle. That led to a discussion about recreation, and inevitably talk turned to a subject close to black people, the church.
What do you think might happen if there's a policy that says that, we're not going to accept churches in Soul City if they are financially in the red or they have only 50 members? Do you think that might be a good thing, or do you think we may be damaging one segment of the population? Because what in fact we might be saying is that we're forcing people to consolidate, get together, and they may not like this kind. There are all sorts of reasons the church congregation split off. Isn't that right, Reverend?
Well, I don't think it would go so well. It probably would be an advantage in one way, but there are numbers of ways that it probably wouldn't.
Can you sort of cite some of these ways
All
that
right.
might be disadvantageous?
If you have about 10,000 people here in Soul City, and we have churches already built around, we are certainly going to try to get at least 3,000 over at Snow Hill. There's Ridgeway across the hill is going to try to get as many as they can.
In other words, what you're going to do is really try to proselytize and get the people who are living in Soul City to come to your churches outside of Soul City.
We're going to try to captivate every creature who needs a church home.
If enough people came into Soul City and they wanted to establish a church, those people would establish a church. So I think that the whole thing would be is just build a city. Let the people come. If they want to build a city, you say, we are a church, we have the land, we sell you the land and let you build yourself a church. I think this would be the answer to the whole thing.
There are no churches on Soul City property yet, but there is an ancient graveyard which speaks of the horrors of slavery.
I'm standing on the site of a pre-revolutionary cemetery that we expect to preserve and use as one of the quiet open spaces of Soul City. Most of the gravestones you see here are obviously, by looking at the tombstones, the graves of white people, or the, shall we say, masters of the plantation. Now, along the back, or the back end of the graveyard, we can see the graves of our brothers, and they're easily identifiable also, because they only had first names, they never had last names, and they don't know when those slaves were born. We think that this kind of historical setting is something that ought to be remembered, ought to be cataloged for future generations.
McKissick has established the Soul City Foundation to deal with social welfare for the new community. They will be concerned with education, health, and training of residents, and they have already made an auspicious start. This summer, they fed 100 children from the area with 2 hot meals a day. When the children were unable to come to the big house because they were harvesting the crops, Soul City brought the food to them, setting up tables near the fields. They also provided medical and dental exams and organized a Head Start program. The children learned about the history of Soul City and studied black culture through African dance and art. It is the first step to prepare these children for the transition from rural life to life in a cosmopolitan city.
We have to stop and quit philosophizing sometime and really get down to the hard work where you aren't going to have a whole lot of people seeing you. You're going to perspire and you're going to sweat, and it's not going to be glamorous and nobody gives a hoot about what you're doing. This is what we got to do now. We really got to get down and build a nation for black people, and you cannot have a nation without an economy. If someone else controls your economy, you are a colony. And black people in the United States, no matter what part of the United States they're in, they're still in ghettos, and ghettos are colonies because the economy is controlled by other forces.
We must begin to tell our young there's a world.
Next time someone says the black woman is domineering, remind them how gentle her strength. He was a giant among music greats, a genius of improvisation. And although John Coltrane, distinguished tenor saxophonist, has been dead for over 3 years, much of the man still lives on. Those who worked with Train respected and even worshipped him. They say he was a quiet, deep thinker, and his music reflects such profound thoughts. The golden sax, which led a relentless search for a universal sound, has been silent for 3 years now. However, Train has left more than a legend behind. There are his sons, his daughter, and carrying on the work and spirit of John Coltrane is his wife, Alice.
The strongest influence, the most overpowering influence is John on my life and my music. I call him a very spiritual man. He believed in the universality of religions and the fact that there was a sameness, a oneness, like one creator of all people. And he had his own rules, if you want to call it a religion. He had certain things that he observed, certain things in his diet. He was a vegetarian. He had certain hours for meditation during the day and night. And he had his ideas of how he wanted his children brought up. You know, he didn't want to direct their thoughts, you know, when it came to what they would like to choose, you know. I feel the same way as John does, the same way he felt about religion. I don't have a set religion or religious faith, you know, to say I belong to this faith or this church or so forth, you know. But I know that I am a spiritual being. I can say that today. I am a spiritual being. John was my direction. I feel that this is the way that I had to go in life, because I accept the music from him. You know, I accept the things that he did, and it seems to be exactly what I want to do, because there's so many things that he did in music I would have done the same way myself. It was always, when he played, that expression that came out of him was really what was inside. You know, whatever was real, whatever was truth, this is what came out of John when he played. Let my children be first in my life. They're first to me. I feel they're my presence from John. So I really don't have to leave home. I mean, John provided well enough income from all of the work he did. I don't have to leave my children to go out to work. So they come first, and if I do get concerts or I have to do work in recording, I do it, but I never take away that much time from home. I like to be home, and I don't like to go too far or travel too far away. Michelle is 10, John is 6, Ravi is 5, and Oran is 3. This year, 3 years since John's death, I've played about 4 or 5 concerts, and really, to me, it's quite a lot of work because I didn't do anything over the past years. So I liked it very much, that concert we played at Glen Cove. One thing that I liked about it was the fact that we played for so many children. This is a part of the music. And Pharoah Sanders, as you know, was one of the members of John's band. I had Reggie Workman and Bill Wood on bass. I had my drummer, Rashid Ali, on drums.
Explain themselves. Let's hear it from Miss Alice Coltrane. You got it, baby.
My concert, I played a selection written by my husband entitled Africa. It's the feeling that I get from playing his music. It's sort of a sharing, you know, with him. It's sort of a being with him on the mental plane or on the spiritual plane. But for me to play his music, I don't feel that I'm an extension, and I don't feel that I can contribute to anything that he did musically. But I just share in things that he did, all the things that he developed and produced, I share in them. I would like to state at this time that there were days that I know that I spent more than 20 hours in meditation. And there were periods of time that lapsed like beyond 2 or 3 weeks that I know that I was well beyond what the human endurance is when it comes to meditation. And I found out so much about myself and about the people around me and about my husband and family. And also I found out that whatever questions that I might have had in my mind concerning whatever events in the future or past were answered. My personal experience in meditation brought me face to face with God. Hand in hand, heart to heart, and almost to the point he was me and I was him. Like I said, there were demands made, definite demands, which took me away from the world, you know, and at one point almost away from everything, music, family, and all, because the sacrifice had to be within an inch of my life, almost literally. And I feel that because it was such a high price paid, now I can't say it was the highest price as Buddha or Christ, because that was life, you know, or Martin Luther King. It was life, you know. But I've been very close to the end of my life, and I feel that I've been given my freedom now. That I can act, I can be, I can live as I want to, and nothing can. There's no claim, no one can bind me, or there's no action I have to pay. I have no karmas to pay. You know, I think all of it has been given back to me, that I'm free.
You are young, gifted and black. We must begin to tell our young. There's a world, little girl, waiting for you. Yours is the quest that's just begun. So when you're feeling depressed, alienated, and real low, there's a great truth that you should know. To be young, gifted and black, your soul's intact. Don't you forget it. Your soul's intact. Oh, I'm feeling good now. To be young, gifted and black. Oh, how I long to know the truth. There are times when I look back and I am haunted by my youth. But my joy of today is that we can all be proud to say, to be young, gifted and black, hey, is where it's at, is where it's at, is where it's at.
In your heart, you know she's right.
not a tribal dance in Kenya or Ghana. These are Americans at a cultural festival in Washington, D.C. There is a new interest and awareness in the history and culture of the mother country. But these demonstrations of nationalism and Pan-Africanism are sometimes questioned. Does an identity with Africa have any practical value? Is wearing a natural or a dashiki enough? Has the recent interest of black Americans in African countries succeeded in changing America's foreign policy toward Africa? Black Journal asks a cross-section of African ambassadors and black government officials for their views.
Mr. Ambassador, how do you feel about the cultural ties between Africans and black Americans?
Whenever I have to answer this particular question, I cast my mind back to 1492 when Columbus discovered America. And I think of the various generations of people from Europe who have come to this country and the opportunity they have had to expose their own culture to this country. And then I think of my own people, the black people of this country, when they came from Africa. And in their case, the lack of opportunity in order to expose the African culture to this country. And then we come to this, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. And we now see that if we do not take the opportunity today to expose African culture to this country, then our roots, our people in Africa, would have missed the opportunity to show to the world what there is in Africa.
Ambassador Deborah's country, Ghana, is rich in African culture. The art in his home is typical of African expression.
This magnificent statue is that of the Ochiami. Ochiami is a linguist and is the spokesman of the chief. You will find him portrayed in this beautiful painting. There he is with this staff, which is a symbol of authority. Now, in this picture, you see children portraying the chief and dancers. The interesting thing about all these paintings is that our brothers in America have also realized the importance of these things. In front of us here, that's in front of my wife and myself, we have the Owari game. It is a very interesting game, and we shall illustrate to it. We go on like this.
Ambassador Deborah feels that in addition to demonstrations of cultural identity, political and economic ties are necessary. Ambassador Chika Fall represents French-speaking Senegal.
Nous le pensons et nous le souhaitons.
During the 2 years that he has been ambassador to the United States, he has hoped to see black Americans use their political power to increase U.S. foreign aid to African countries. He has placed great hope in the black representatives in Congress and the State Department to get this done. He feels the relations between black Americans and Africans have developed favorably and that we are all brothers. American blacks came originally from Africa. Black Americans, he insists, cannot forget Africa. Zambia's Ambassador Chona has seen little political awareness on the part of American blacks.
You know, the Jewish people, for example, in this country have got very strong cultural ties with Israel. And even Mr. Agnew, for example, I see that, the village where his old ancestors came from are proud to see that, the person who descends from a person who came from their village has reason to become Vice President of the United States. And therefore, it is just natural that even we ourselves must have links with the black Americans here, that they should be proud of Africa's tradition. There is a lot that is good in Africa. I myself come from a village, and whenever I talk to people, about the real traditional life in the village, our customs and the way we live, and our generosity, it's really most fascinating in such a way that I think black Americans should learn more about the traditional way of living so that they can adopt the good side.
For a long time, there was no communications between black Africa and black Americans here in the United States. I came here in college, And it was very difficult to have any meaningful contacts with the black Americans. Likewise in Kenya, people tended to feel that being black was a thing to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. But these days I find that it's very encouraging to meet you, Tony Brown, and many brothers and sisters here in the United States who feel that we have shared ideals, shared cultural ties of history, of culture, and of common suffering, and I believe commitment to the cause of human development and human welfare.
Black Americans will be
We
able to
explained to
help you,
Kenya's ambassador that black Americans were developing some political power.
That is one aspect. I find that as I move around at least 23 or some people say 30 million black Americans here, and this is a very important constituency that could be a very strong lobby for Africa.
The ambassadors feel that political action is a necessary component to a cultural and psychological identity with Africa.
Means more to identify with Africa than running around with a dashiki or wearing a bush, because in some parts of Africa, in Nairobi, you looked around and you saw the brothers wearing Brook Brothers suits, and they were wearing very Americanized, very business-like clothing. So the physical manifestations of identification with Africa are superficial. 3 years ago, as a member of then Vice President Hubert Humphrey's staff, we visited 9 countries in Africa, and we were very, very amazed to discover the rich, raw beauty of Africa. And we also realized that as far as this country's foreign policy is concerned, there is what is called a rule of 10. Only 10 African countries can receive major aid at any one time. So going beyond stimulating cultural awareness in the black community as far as our ties, our historical ties with Africa, I think we have to wake up to the political realities. The African nations do not have a constituency here as Latin America, as white Europe. So black Americans will have to become very much aware of the necessities and the needs of the developing nations of Africa.
Congress limits aid to 10 African countries at any one time. Last year it was $150 million, about the average for a single country in Latin America receiving aid, and less than the amount we spend in Vietnam in a month.
Well, our greatest thrust is to expose the defects in American foreign policy with respect to Africa, to try to build up some kinds of pressure for change in that policy. So I think that more black Americans ought to travel to Africa, because many black Americans have distortions about African concerns, about African interests, and about Africans themselves. They just have no idea. They've been brainwashed over the many decades about the alleged primitiveness of that country. They have no appreciation for the value of the resources, the resourcefulness of Africans. We need to activate the black press, the black media, for example, in order to get some more positive stories told about Africa. That's one of our failings as far as the African posture is concerned here in the United States. We need to generate more pressure on our federal government in order to help effectuate change, because there's no question that that American foreign policy in many instances is based upon certain kinds of political pressures. And our concerns about Africa ought to be added to the list of our agenda. All of our national organizations, the NAACP, the Urban League, the Black Panthers, all of these organizations, in addition to all their demands about the domestic situation, ought to demand a change in American foreign policy toward Africa.
Working to reverse America's declining aid to Africa is former U.S. Ambassador Sam Adams.
Well, we think that we have reversed the trend. I mean, that this current year, that the amount of aid which was provided to Africa tended to go up and reverses the trend, I mean, which had been going down, I mean, since fiscal year 67. That we have been very, very fortunate in that the Secretary of State has repeatedly indicated that he hopes that the United States will be able to do more for Africa. we've been able to benefit by his interests. Also, too, that we've had a very excellent kind of cooperation on the part of the African countries themselves.
Tony, I am going to show you a book written by our president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, which he wrote in 1938. When Mzee Jomo Kenyatta wrote this book, he was in London struggling for independence. Jomo Kenyatta feels that no black man can be free as long as any other black people are being suppressed on the basis of color. And he had the firm faith that the dead, the living, and the unborn will unite to rebuild the destroyed shrines. Here Mzee was talking very much about the cultural rejuvenation, cultural regeneration. Before independence or all that time, people tended to be told, if you are black, you are nothing. Blacks had no history, no culture, nothing indigenous. He felt that wherever young people are of African descent, they should unite and rebuild the broken shrines in history, in drama, in music, in arts, and in technology. In other words, rebuild the African personality, rebuild African socialism. Because for some time, people trying to ape the white man. You don't have to ape the white man. You can share, you can communicate, but on the basis of equality.
Give me freedom! Freedom!
With cultural nationalism as a foundation for Pan-Africanism, the expression of African brotherhood will have practical value. Without the realities of economic and political awareness, freedom will remain a song to be sung and a dream deferred.
From the eastern shore of Maryland to the United Nations headquarters in New York is a long walk, but the members of MAN are walking. MAN, or Making a Nation, is comprised of a core group of about 25 brothers and sisters who have been organizers in the civil rights movement, particularly with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Among them are Brother Herman O'Neill and the Reverend James Bevel.
Genocide as defined by the UN Treaty is actually mass murder. Under Article 2 of the United Nations Genocide Agreement, genocide is any act done with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, racial, or religious group. Under Article A of the Genocide Convention Treaty, killing members of a race is genocide. For instance, Dr. Martin Luther King, we think, would systematically and deliberately kill, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. That is, subverting the group to all type of atrocious deeds, such as the Black Panther Party is being put through, such as the NAACP was put through in the form of Medgar Evers being killed in Mississippi, forcing on a race of people living conditions meant to destroy them in whole or in part. Definitely feel that the United States is consciously practicing genocide. We think that they have been doing it historically and progressively throughout the years. Whenever a country look upon its people as being a liability rather than an asset, and see them as tools and machinery and cannot employ them in farm labor or put them back in the cotton fields and become very capitalistic, imperialistic in their thinking, I think that any country that moves that particular way will liquidate its liabilities. When a country has a surplus of food and know that it has hungry people, yet dump that in the ocean, we think this is genocide.
Whatever the outcome of man's confrontation at the United Nations, the question of genocide and its paternal ancestor racism must be dealt with by peoples of the world, but specifically by non-white peoples, since history implies that racism and genocide are Caucasian attitudes with deep historical roots. This is Walter Brooks reporting for Black Journal.
The Desire Housing Project in New Orleans was the scene of recent confrontation between the police and the National Committee to Combat Fascism, a Panther recruiting organization. The sprawling public housing complex is not unlike other neighborhoods around the country. where the NCCF and the Panthers have focused their organizing activities. According to a recent report on the area, 10,594 people are packed into Desire's few acres. 8,312 are under 21 years of age. 61% of the families earn less than $3,000 annually. Municipal services are less than adequate. The social maladies which breed violence and argue for revolutionary struggle definitely exist here.
Besides, the conditions that exist in Desire, like other black communities, we're talking about the poverty, the racism, and the exploitation. Desire is unique in the fact that it's a city within a city, and that accesses to and from this community are very limited. Train tracks, dumps, expressways that just pass over. The impression and the feeling you get is that when you pass and that, everybody's looking in on the zoo.
Living conditions in Desireville are very poor. As you look around, as you see the dump, you see the railroad track, you see the bridges, you see the poor sewage and broken drains. We have an overcrowded area. We're isolated from many of the, what you would call luxuries of the city.
This is Timothy Pratt, a member of the National Committee to Combat Fascism. Timothy, can you tell me a little bit about what happened on the night of September 14th?
What they did, they creeped in from the back of the building. And I must say the reason they did this was because the people in this project were armed from toe to toe. The people in this project had vowed to stand up and protect these brothers. The brothers who had come out here had been feeding their kids. The brothers who had been protecting them from some criminal aspects. Brothers who have been throwing out the dope addicts. And so the people here love the NCCF and they were ready to protect them.
What made you decide to join the NCCF? What kind of inner motivations did you have to want to join that organization?
Being born black. I think that was a criteria. Being born in this racist, a fascistic system, watching my fellow brothers suffer at the hands of the cops.
In many ways, the residents of Desire are in a violent confrontation every day. The violence of existence in an American ghetto. It seems rather clear now that as long as desires exist, the Panthers will also. This is Bill Roussel in New Orleans for Black Journal.
The future of black people depends on their unity. For too long now, black people have been expanding with rhetoric but doesn't define.
The black woman's role should relate to her man and family. But first, she must learn to relate with the community.
Right brother, right sister, right on.